Hi, I'm Dan, 36, gay, married, and welcome back to my video dissertation on the show that still continues to have me in an absolute chokehold, Heated Rivalry. In this series, we'll be going episode by episode through season 1 and discussing the character development, moments that broke me, moments that healed me, and all of the incredibly tiny, nuanced choices that made me fall hard for this version of queer love. All right, quick disclaimer up top. I have not read the books or explored any of the other world building options out there that Rachel Reed has put together. I intend on reading the books after I finish this series, but I am reacting to the episode and the episode itself. So if that isn't interesting to you, by all means, please feel free to go watch something else, and maybe I'll catch you when I read the books. But with that also comes the fact that I probably won't understand certain things, and that I am simply just kind of reacting to what I'm seeing visually, and am obviously biased as a human being by my own experiences. So if I miss something, please feel free to let me know, but let's come with a little bit less heat than we've been getting on some of these other videos. Today we are going to be reacting to episode 5, which is I'll Believe in Anything. If you guys have seen my rewatch, I think it's fairly clear that that episode broke my heart in the best ways. I am literally not an emotional person. I don't cry at anything, really. And episode 5 scratched whatever surface was there, and all of a sudden I was like semi-sobbing in my family room, which was really fun. But for those of you who have been on the ride, you know that I like to kind of segment the episode into a series of key chapters from my point of view. And then I also put an approximate timestamp in the upper right-hand corner, which correlates with the actual timestamps of the episode. So if you want to kind of watch along, you have that for reference as well. For episode 5, my key segments were our recap, coming out, friends, reunited, coming out again, pregame, a loss, the monologue, injured, and sunshine. All right, let's jump in. The freak out from last episode at 25 seconds in. And I didn't realize this until I rewatched and kind of was going very slowly through the episode, that it feels organic that they've inserted these like 2 tiny clips of Kip talking to Elena, trying to say that he's not in love with Scott, which obviously he is. And then we get this shot of Scott in the back of the town car, which we know was right as or right after Elena was giving him the tango talk about how miserable Kip was and sunshine and all of that. And we've just kind of like speckled it in between these scenes of Shane and Ilya. And again, kind of felt organic. We've obviously been introduced to the characters, but the choice to put that little like early foreshadowing Easter egg in, they will be playing very critical roles at the end of the episode, I just thought was fun. Oh, and the club. I still just can't quite stomach watching that. I did get, let me pull it up quick. Just saw it not that long ago. Oh, here we go. I'm going to screw up this username, but Battery Anka potentially pointed out a couple things that I misspoke about in my reaction video, is in terms of the credits for some of the music. And one of them was the slow-mo version of Tattoo was actually produced by Harrison, not Peter. So we've got that. And then I also misspoke about the last song we'll hear, but I'll cover that when we get there. So at about 1:28, we get a scene of Rose waking up. She's got to get back to her hotel for her production day pickup. And my brain was a little bit confused on rewatching, and a number of you in the comments actually helped point out that this was not the morning after the club scene, because as we were shown at the end of episode 4, it appeared as if Shane had gotten to a climax with Rose. But someone pointed out that obviously she doesn't have that like silver dress on as she's leaving. She's got regular clothes, which makes us believe at least that this is something that's been ongoing and that, maybe after a certain period of time now he's having a hard time performing in that way. Brett and I believe, briefly touched on this in our like bonus rewatch of episode 4. But I guess I'll just speak for myself that while I was in the closet and you're dating people, like it is natural to have that physical relationship evolve in a way that you feel like you have to do it. Not that you're being forced at all, but like in order to keep up the charade, right? You do it. And at least when you're like young, I mean, a good breeze could get you going, right? But this like shame moment that he's feeling and trying to, put excuses to it, and for any of us that have been in a similar situation before, it is definitely is reminiscent. And actually, I mean, there's a very clear reason for why that isn't necessarily working physically for him, which he will clearly state in one of my favorite lines in a couple minutes here. But even just in general, like there can be things that are going on, even if you're hooking up with someone of the sex you're attracted to, that just leads to non-performance. So, but here then, as we're watching Rose, the look on her face and the tone of her voice, and then her bringing up, I think we should have dinner, just the two of us, later this week. If you skim over that and you don't know what's coming, it might just be like, yeah, like it's fine, cool. Let's hang out one-on-one. Maybe we just haven't had enough time together, lately. With hindsight here, I think it's almost like she has kind of figured it out, or is, potentially considering that he may not be attracted to her. He may not be straight, because the way she says it's fine, that is, to me, I don't know, just reads a little bit more like, I'm not trying to give you like a pep talk, or like, oh no, it's all good. Hey, you're stressed. It's fine. Like, let's keep pushing this forward. It's more of a, I've come to accept that maybe this is the reality, or there's a potential reality here. So just a little foreshadowing moment there for what we'll see fairly shortly. And then we get a shot of Shane in his kitchen making coffee, scrolling through the social media posts about the two of them, or the replies back to their post. And he's not smiling. He's like stoic as he's looking at his phone, almost in a way that if you're so deep in the closet, you're looking for validation that you're pulling it off. This is something that people are believing. I actually don't think that's where Shane's head is right now. I think it's more of like potentially trying to find reasons or ways that he may be leveraging like outside interpretations of their interactions as a couple as a way to like convince himself, or see the feelings that he may or may not be feeling through the eyes of someone else. It feels more of like he's looking for something to convince him that he feels this way for her. And of course, as Jacob does, we get a parallel shot of Ilya sitting at the airport, this time flying home from Boston, from Montreal, which we always see them flying to each other because it's a build up to something. And that this is the first shot that we've been given of him leaving the city, potentially meaning to signify that like he was there, he saw that, he may have officially lost Shane, and that he needs to move on, go back to his regular life, go back to wherever. And of course, he's scrolling through the same thing that Shane is, looking at all the comments. I know in my deep dive of episode 4, I called out that as Ilya was in the gym at first seeing that, Shane and Rose were together, the crop of the picture was just looking at Rose and not looking at Shane's face, which I thought was really interesting. And I think this continues to move that forward, is that he wants to hear what people are saying about Shane and Rose. And given how much public admiration there appears to be for the two of them as a couple, he's not looking for, like comments that are like, oh, I don't like these two, F them. It's consuming, I think, the potential reality of what may come. Also, so then, wait, what is his name? What is that guy's name? God damn it. Marlo. Okay. Sorry, that was an absolute tangent. Wait, so then we have Marlo in the scene coming up to Ilya to hand him a coffee, and he asks, did you get any sleep last night? Assuming that we're talking about him thinking Ilya went home with the girl from the club, which we know he didn't, which then brings me back to thinking that the scene we saw between Shane and Rose was the night after the club, whatever. And a couple of commenters have pointed out the name of the commentary podcast that kind of is throughout the season is Man in the Crease, which is just hockey cheeks. It also is interesting as they're continuing their dialogue about the East versus West game that's going to come up. Something that the fans have been looking forward to, have been wanting, and something that we never thought we'd see, Ilya and Shane playing on the same team. And it's like, yes, it fits to the storyline of the show, but also speaks to all of us sitting here and watching, and that, yes, we do want them to play on the same team. Not even necessarily from like a hockey perspective, but we want them to be on the same team in life or on the same page in their, obviously, again, makes sense with the context of the sport. It also, if we're zooming out and taking ourselves out of this world for a second, could be who's topping who, or who is in the driver's seat of what's happening. And we'll see a little bit here, and I'll talk about it in a second, that it's more, for me, who's in the driver's seat of their eventual relationship, or who's in charge of moving things forward at this point, who's leaning in versus calling the shots. And we get another shot of Scott doing his run, and these podcasters just kind of like continuing to shit on him and be like, will he continue this red hot streak, or do you think he'll patter out just like he always does halfway through the season? And we know what's to come. And so it's a perfect kind of reminder and setup for how monumental the end of this episode will be. And again, with the timeline jumping that we saw in episode 3, I wonder if this is meant to bring us back to that first meet cute with Skip, as if that's where we're starting right now. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And now we move on to coming out. Something I also did not catch until I rewatched very closely. It appears that we're back at the same restaurant where we met, potentially signifying a start and an end in the same situation, giving us a little taste of potentially the significance of the dinner that we're about to have. Miles is extremely jealous of me. Shane. I have to admit, the Miles character in the show, at least, has been a little like weird for me. And this, I mean, I guess she explicitly asked him, like, did you not realize that Miles was gay? Like, I think he was openly flirting with you, openly dancing with you, openly whatever. And it's almost a little bit like she's using him as like a thermometer to be like, you're not like tensing up and like being weird about Miles, right? Let's say that she was asking a super tropey straight guy, or if Miles is meant to represent someone who is in Rose's life, who she loves as a friend, supports, and that by bringing him up, we're actually demonstrating her allyship to try and make Shane feel more comfortable. Maybe that's it. Rose's face at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. She's not buying what you're selling, Shane. And I like that she is pushing him a bit here. Obviously, we know we're leading up to the end of this scene here. It almost comes off as like utter confusion, and then like, oh, you might be just tempering your response or not giving me the full answer, and so I'm gonna actually lean into this for a second. And Shane's face at 3:45. The nonchalance that Rose is having this conversation. Rose is talking about, there's a ton of actors who are gay, but they just haven't come out. There's a nonchalance to it, but she's almost kind of like rolling her eyes, and you see Shane's face kind of drop for a second. I love the way that Rose was written. I don't know if this was verbatim Rachel or a little editing from Jacob, but the way that she asks, are there any gay hockey players? And she stops herself and is like, well, obviously there are, right? Just are there any that are out? And as a theme throughout this whole season and what I've talked about is that there's a lot of like unlearning of stupid bullshit that like we've been taught to believe over time, and her course correcting that question, though small, is like acknowledging that there are gay people in every single walk of life, even the hypermasculine world of the MLA, and also kind of takes like one layer off of the places to hide for Shane. And maybe that's not the right way to put it. It's taking one less, it maybe removes like one additional layer of the coming out process potentially for Shane, that it's not absurd that you would be gay and in the MLH. It's more of you would have to come out to say it, and him fumbling through his response with, yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure, but looking up, looking down, he is clearly trying to find a way to answer this question. And even at the end, he like, when he's saying none of them have, or no one's come out, he kind of like cracks a little bit of a smile. Is it like, oh, for a second, we were thinking back to Ilya? I don't know. Hudson Williams is such an unbelievable actor. At like 4:16, Rose hears his response, and she gives this kind of like, and he, when he hears that, his eyes kind of like look up and look right at her, almost as if to signify like, wait, I didn't convince her with what I just said. Or maybe she doesn't believe it. Another thing that the lighting design in the show has just been out of this world. But we are, if you zoom out for a second, you think about it, this conversation is incredibly intimate and something that as it continues, you wouldn't assume is a conversation that's happening out in public, but rather something that's happening behind closed doors. But in this shot, the restaurant's fairly empty. We've got the lighting on the table, and as we're kind of going back and forth between them, it's shining on their face, kind of showing that this is an intimate setting, or this is a close, somewhat maybe safe setting, which visually helps you feel more comfortable with this conversation as it evolves in the setting that we're in, as opposed to, people being around or walking back and forth or noticing Shane or noticing Rose. And there was a little mental callback for me to when Scott tried to take Kip to that Mexican restaurant, but he got clocked from across the street. They didn't even get in. So we have that all the way to this setting where they're about to have a very important conversation. And Rose, at least to us, reveals her intent in having this dinner. And that she says, I don't think I'm going about this the right way. AKA going a little gentle, a little soft, a little indirect, a little passive. And Shane is not picking up what she's putting down. And this for sure reminded me of a handful of interactions that I've had prior to coming out where people knew, and knew is like had all of the inklings and maybe had heard something, but almost like didn't want to let me have to continue lying And so we're a little bit more direct, but also protective, and created a safe space for that. And the hand grab, I really like you, Shane. I really like you too. And Rose is just like, bro, I don't think so. And, Shane trying to keep the wheels on. Like, no, I like you. Yeah, of course. You like talking to me? Yes. And then when he answers, sure, to, do you like kissing me? The jig is up, my dude. A little slip of the tongue there, but no bueno. Hudson Williams with the micro expressions again at about 5:04. She's continuing to signal to Shane that, like, it's all good, but I think we should kind of like call it what it is. And he goes to almost like chew the inside of his lip or something. And it's that like pinch me moment of, I need you to be locked in right now because there's potential danger on the horizon. She may have figured it out. And when she says, you'd maybe prefer to be kissing Miles, his eyes start darting. He starts welling up. He clenches his jaw and he tries to go and say something or respond and can't get the word out. And Rose jumps right in and is comforting him and being like, it's okay. It's okay. We're not going to like leave you in this languish, kind of spiral. Like, it's fine. And we make one more attempt at potentially salvaging the situation. He, with bravado, is like, I like talking to you. I like being with you. I like spending time with you. And again, going back to potentially the flaw in his plan was the physical of it all not working. And he says, I know the sex stuff is a problem. And Rose is about to hit us with a line that nearly knocked me off the couch, which is, it's not a problem. A problem is something you can fix. And says it with such tender confidence that it leaves actually no room for Shane to rebuttal. And she uses the analogy, which, we all know and love, which is square peg in a round hole. She then gets as it gets out of her mouth, she realizes the unintended parallel to the thing we were just talking about. She kind of grosses herself out, which I think broke the ice a bit. And it's, again, this like, she's gently moving him through this, but with a firm hand of like, we're not leaving things open-ended. We aren't meant to work, right? And that's totally fine. It's not leaving it open-ended. Well, do you like me, or could we make this work, or what could I do for you, or whatever. She is moving him through this breakout turn, and Shane is obviously receptive and is struggling to find the words to say. There are a lot of theories that you all can look up if you're interested. But when you're having a conversation with someone, and if they look up to the left versus up to the right, it's considered neuro-linguistic programming, but it's ways for you to recall things. And up and to the left versus up and to the right, it's usually visually you're trying to reconstruct something. There's also interpretations that maybe sometimes one is meant to indicate lying, but either way, he is removing himself visually from what's going on to try and come up with a way to respond to her. And she again immediately steps in, is like, you don't owe me any kind of explanation. And there is not an ounce of anger, of disappointment, of anything in her voice. It is simply like care and tenderness. And I think part of this calls back to, I want to say it was episode 4. Yes, I believe it was episode 4, when we got Shane freaking out, leaving Ilya's, and then the next shot was him at lunch with his parents. And he's clearly frustrated and kind of out of it. And they're talking again about Wimbledon. And he's like, whatever, just go take the tickets. I'll just call them and say I'm sick. You guys will still be able to go. And his mom said, you're not a liar. We don't lie. We would never ask you to do that. Right now, I would assume Shane is feeling bad about having lied to Rose. And even in a way where it may or may not have been fully intentional, but that he has also now found someone who he actually loves, not romantically, but like thoroughly enjoys being around, enjoys their company, is having someone to talk to for the first time about stuff that isn't hockey, that's real life. And I think that even doubles down on potentially the internal monologue of his shame and his need to feel like he should explain more to her or should give her more of a reason. And at 6:23, there's a moment of just acceptance. And that emotion kind of waves over him. He's glossy-eyed. He's trying not to smile. And Rose continuing to be just the absolute perfect person to guide him through this conversation and coming out. She asks him, can I ask you if you've ever been with another guy? And we get an immediate callback to Ilya, and he nods, not saying anything, but looks her directly in the eye. It is a silent but extremely loud confirmation that he has been with guys, and we'll see this evolve to the conversation that we have at the hotel. But he's not shrinking away from it. He doesn't have the words for it yet. But in this moment, he knows that it was never going to work with Rose simply because she is a female. And her, asking him, have you ever told anyone that before? And again, non-verbally shaking our head no. Now we're kind of looking down, and Rose asks, was it different? And we get the stairwell kiss for a brief second, and Shane can't help but smile, just thinking about that memory with Ilya. And he finally is able to speak and says, of course. And of course, Rose asks, was it better? Get another clip back to the hotel with Ilya, and he almost like covering his mouth, because I don't know if he can even comprehend the fact that he's saying this now. It's like, of course, it was better. And as he begins to kind of like crack in a good way, the exterior shell of this all, he kind of like chuckles and smiles, and part of it is, I'm sure, the absurdity of what he's about to say, but he is covering it with his hand. So, signifying this is obviously something that is meant to be kept secret, that isn't supposed to be said out loud. And we get, I like to be the hole rather than the peg. And that, I think, officially made Rose's week. She bursts out laughing and says, that's the best thing any gay boyfriend has ever told me. And he's even just trying to like wrap his mind around the fact that he just said that. And Rose is kind of walking through this and is like, I mean, yeah, that's the best line any of my gay boyfriends have ever hit me with. And he's so dumbfounded by this. And she's like, I went to theater school. Like 80% of the guys I dated have left me for other guys. And now we have officially clicked into like friend mode. They're laughing back and forth. He's so, dumbfounded by that stat. And Rose, the perpetual PR agent for Miles, is like, hey, you should follow him back on Instagram. Shane's like, no. And we all know what's going on between those ears. He's like, I've already found my prince, my Russian asshole of a prince. And we get our boy Shane in the moment, kind of bobs out for a second, and it's like, wait, but you haven't told him anything, right? And again, like triple, quadruple downing on Rose is the MVP of at least the first half of this episode. She's like, no, absolutely not. I would never. Just, again, reconfirming, I'm a safe space for you. I love you for who you are. Ugh, I just love it. And even just doubling down on, and I never will. I think was just really important, and a little bit of a callback to Skip. And as comfortable as he was inside the restaurant, as we get out, our arms are like super crossed, and then we go to thumbs in pockets as we usually do. And Rose just continues to melt him and reaffirm how much she cares about him, and that he should reach out to her because she will be reaching out to him, and that they need to be friends. And as I was thinking about it, we really don't see Shane having deep relationships outside of his family, right? He is friends with Hayden. They've been, buddies for a long time. But as we called out in episode 4, there are so many normal things that friends would do together, talk about together, that he doesn't do with Hayden for a multitude of reasons, including the fact that he's not out. But it really felt like Rose officially positioned herself as the safe landing place with him, and we'll see that continue. And I can't even imagine, from Shane's point of view, how big of a relief that would be, just to have someone that you're having a hard day, whatever the hell happens, right? And they know you, they know more about you than many other people do, and that they will have additional context to help you navigate certain things moving forward. I just love it. And almost to meaningfully draw a comparison between Ilya and Rose, we have Rose saying, like, you're secretly one of the funniest people ever. And of course, Shane's like, well, that's a secret you don't have to keep. But we call back to last episode when they're sitting on the couch and Ilya's like, everyone says that you're boring. And he's like, who? What? He goes, me, I tell everyone that. It's just this, like, again, stark contrast, which is the way that this whole show has been set up, from color theory to everything, demonstrating the safety paradigm, I guess, that he feels, potentially Ilya being on the high danger side of the house, and Rose being someone much more safe to invest in, share with. And I love that statement that things and stuff can be hard for me, aka once you get through the top layer of hockey, of my persona, of whatever, the rest of that is hard for him to tap into, to discuss, again, for a multitude of reasons, being in the closet, but also I think from a neurodivergent lens, that under the surface stuff is often fairly chaotic in something that can be hard to apply pattern recognition to. And so she is offering to help him put the puzzle pieces together. And a one last kiss on the lips. I love Rose. And his awkward wave, and watching the car kind of drive off. It's like, did that just happen? Did I just come out? I mean, what a massive milestone. And then that, I cannot speak highly enough about the way Rose was written, the way Rose was acted, and Hudson's performance in that last scene. It was so healing, even as someone who has been out of the closet for a very, very long time. Seeing someone so loving, so supportive, so unoffended by the fact that he dated you and that ultimately he is gay. I think contrasting her with maybe Elena, for example, with Kip. Elena is the friend, and the friend that may have already met Kip when he was out. And that it would be easier and safer to introduce a character like that, let's say from, I don't know, Shane's past, that was back in the city and they wanted to get together and, they were besties, and have that be how he came out. But having the choice be, you're dating a famous person in a very public way, and that even in that heightened state of risk, she still showed up the way she did with him in the scene, again, loving and tender, and non-accusatory and not angry, just definitive, but supportive. It was just an incredible choice. And if there's, maybe 3 scenes of this season that will forever live rent-free in my brain, that is one of them. All right, and now we are moving on to the next chapter, which is friends. We obviously just had this incredible moment with Rose and Shane. He came out and in his own way, I guess. And we cut to now Boston. We're at Ilya's house, and we have Svetlana and Ilya just kind of chilling in bed together. And of course, they are watching hockey because that's who they are. We also get this great line where Svetlana's like, "Since when did you start smoking again?" A callback to Shane as the ultimate like anti-smoking campaign manager with Ilya, but also then suggesting that he had noticeably stopped smoking, which makes you think, is that because he wanted to stop for Shane, and now that they are not together, he's going back to his old ways? Is this meant to signify the additive stress that he's under because he feels that he's lost Shane to Rose? And Svet is just, again, like I said this in one of my previous deep dives, get this girl a spot on ESPN covering the MLH/NHL. She knows everything. She's amazing. Actually, one of my, oh God, where is that? I'll see if I can find it in post. But someone commented, I think it was one of my videos, that Svetlana and Shane's mom should have their own hockey podcast. I think it was like Women in the Crease or something to parallel the Men in the Crease. But that would actually be a very informed hockey podcast. So Jacob, if you're listening, maybe that's the crossover we need in season 2. And Svet asking, "Oh, are you playing on the same team as Hollander this year?" Well, obviously she already knows, but she's asking the question to kind of bring up the topic. And after she has already kind of been talking a little bit of shit about somebody else, Ilya's like, "Oh, is he also mediocre?" And she's like, "No, he's amazing. Those hands. And he's gorgeous." And one of Ilya's nervous tics comes out, and he kind of like brushes the side of his nose, is like, "Yeah, if you say so." And Svet she's not going to let that one fly. And he looks back over to her like, "What?" He's like, "You know he's gorgeous, and you know he's good." So this obviously carries less weight than the conversation we just saw with Rose, because obviously Svetlana already knows that Ilya has hooked up with Sasha. My guess is that they are at a point in which she is fully aware, and or he has said to her that he's bi. But the choice to state it in the inverse, putting the focus on gorgeous and good, is again like if you're playing like gay battleship and you're trying to stay in the closet, like there was a direct hit. Like, the alarms are going off because she's stating the thing. Like, don't tell me that you don't think he's gorgeous, and don't tell me you don't think he's good. Because even though you don't say these things to me, I know you, and I know you do. And he goes, "Yes, he's good." Deflect, deflect, deflect. And then we get, again, similar to what the Men in the Crease were talking about. Svetlana brings up, "I can't wait to see you on the same line with him." And he's like, "I don't know if he can play wing." And without even looking away from the TV or even taking a single second, she's like, "No, but you can." And he's like, "What? You're my best friend. You know that I am the king, the macho, the one in charge." And we see them kind of like erupt into this like childish banter and play. And he, jokingly gets up and, pretends to like WWE pile drive her, and they're laughing, and it's in clearly this is like a super light moment between the two of them, which demonstrates a shift from when we saw, I believe when we saw Svetlana last, and they were in the back of the car going out to the club, and Ilya couldn't get off his phone because he's thinking about and or texting Shane. There is a levity to this interaction that may signify that like Ilya is less burdened than maybe he was before. It also, to me, was like, again, this like callback to he is safe in this space. He is safe with her. And thus he is able to like tap into this childlike, goofy state. And we go to now him going and laying in his head in her lap. And there is clearly so much love between the two of them. But unlike the other scenes or even the way he's, talked about her previously, this is giving full platonic besties from childhood, which I think deep down is what they are. I was wondering in rewatching this that, sometimes it appears as if Ilya uses physical affection and interaction as a way to demonstrate how he feels about that person. And I wonder if, although he's clearly hundreds of miles ahead of where he's at with Shane with Svetlana, if some of their sexual interactions were also him adding to the ways in which he showed he loved her. I mean, he's also bi, so like we're not doing any bi erasure here. But to me as a viewer, it was really important that we got this scene directly after the scene we got with Rose and Shane, and that we get this like childlike wonder and platonic engagement between the two of them as a maybe like a new marker of where they are at or where Ilya's at. We got another shot across the bow from Svet that's like, he's gorgeous, right? And of course, another subtle foreshadowing moment here where Svetlana's like, yeah, well, I wonder what amazing outfits Rose Landry's going to bring to the All-Star game. And Ilya's just staring at the TV, and like the vein in his forehead is very pronounced. And he's just kind of like almost looks as if he's in this like mixed space of like jealousy, concern, anger, and his fist is balled up. He's clearly thinking about the fact that he's going to see Shane soon, and Rose very much may be there, and he may get another run-in or view of the two of them together like we did at the club. I think both scenes are incredibly important going into the next chapter. All right. Moving on to Reunited. We get our boys in Tampa, and Ilya is sitting at the bar in this Hawaiian shirt, which I absolutely love. Like, where the hell did that come from? Is this like meant to articulate visually that he's in a different space? Because usually, right, we've had this like Shane in white, Ilya in black, streetwear, athletic, intimidating, somewhat fits to I'm a dad. Ooh, that might have been a little Freudian slip. We'll get back to that. Just like a chill dad in color, in something that's stereotypical of, somebody that would be going on vacation in Tampa. And that even more so than in contrast with the setting, which is appearing to be a high-end bar. You've got the black and gold, which is his team's colors. It's kind of swanky, and he's just sitting there in this like red-ish Hawaiian shirt. It's almost as if the costume design department was like, we're going to try to dress you as if you're casual, as if you're on vacation, you're chilling, you're not leaning into any of the things that would typically fall within your range of emotions. And even though he's dressed casually, we are getting the nervous eyes darting around the room, trying to see who's there, looking for and waiting for Shane. And we also get him doing some of the self-soothing that I brought up in episode 4, where he's playing with one of his ears. And I was really happy to see this Ilya show up to the All-Star game and not someone who was maybe in a position to strike back at Shane or be hyper defensive. You can tell he's done a lot of silent work internally, and he is anxiously awaiting the potential opportunity to run into Shane. And our boy walks in his snazzy suit, and the second Ilya sees him, he takes a deep breath, chugs the rest of his Corona, just kind of like, all right, here we go. And trying to break the ice a little bit, Ilya takes a big gulp and, again, not looking at him, throws a softball joke over to Shane. So are they out of ginger ale, Captain? Obviously, every time Ilya has been interacting with Shane, he traditionally does not drink. It seems like maybe only Vegas have been the opportunities for them to see, or for him to see Shane with a cocktail. But again, total softball, icebreaker type joke-esque. Could also be a callback to when Ilya slid him the ginger ale pre-tuna meltdown. And these next 30 seconds or so were really interesting to me because it's almost as if they have inversed their roles, right? Ilya was traditionally more forward, more confident. He was in the driver's seat, let's say, in terms of what all was going on between the two of them. But leading up to this moment, right, Shane is coming in with a newfound clarity, which is driving his confidence in this interaction, right? He, let's just say, needed the confirmation that if this wouldn't even work with Rose, I know the answer, right? I know I'm gay. I know that I now actually have like someone in life that knows that I can like rely on, that's like a safety net for me, X, Y, and Z. I can move with more confidence and kind of build on that forward momentum. Whereas Ilya is softening and maybe digesting the anger or the emotions that he felt in the club in a way that is illuminating that it's, no, you actually love him, and this hurts because you love him, and that it's strange because usually you could just shut it off, move on to the next. And so he's coming into this situation more sheepish, but also equally as invested in gaining clarity, I think would probably be the right way to put it. He's nervous. He is more raw than I think he would enjoy being or feeling. You know, he knows that this is his shot to get more intel, learn more about Shane and his potential relationship with Rose. And so he's not willing to throw that opportunity away, and thus is kind of ready and willing to engage, ask questions. And then we get, did you bring anyone with you? And he wants to see the answer, not just hear it. So Ilya's eyes are now locked on Shane. And Shane's like, my parents were going to come. They're going to Mexico in a couple weeks. They've been to these before. So, it doesn't matter. And just gives him and that was almost interpreted as like a signifier to Shane that he doesn't believe you, or he knows that there's more to that, which Shane again kind of like takes in this like micro blow and kind of like bats his eyelashes, and then with a smirk on his face says, also, I didn't feel like being managed this weekend. Okay. Which, you know, we all can interpret. I don't want more eyes on me than I need. I want to do the things I want. I want to act the way I want without additional oversight. A little breadcrumb for our boy Ilya there. And then Shane asks Ilya back, did you bring anybody? And the look on Ilya's face at 12:50-ish, he is looking him dead in the eye and says nope, and brings the beer up to his lips, not breaking eye contact. Couldn't be a clearer signal that he is very much open to something happening between the two of them, which again is not the retreated, reactive Ilya that we've seen a handful of times earlier in the season here. And Shane, just like not really knowing what to do with that, is like kind of staring off. And Ilya, there's almost like he's like bouncing his leg, like his body's kind of like there's extra energy that needs to like be released in some way. And he looks over at Shane and looks him kind of up and down, garnering Shane's attention. And he kind of looks back over and he looks back at him, makes a joke about his shirt. And Ilya's like, oh, thanks. I like to get into the spirit, which is, again, not who he appears to be or who he portrays himself as. And just as we're getting some flirting and subtle, Shane's like, well, you're pulling it off. We get one of Scott's teammates. I mislabeled them as somebody else in my reaction video. I can't be bothered to go back and find their actual name. He's a little toasty, and Shane almost like putting the words back in his mouth or trying to like hide the smile. Just kind of like puts his thumb and finger over his lips. And Ilya is like, one black coffee, please. AK, get this guy out of my face. Battery dying again. 1 second. And goes to like, protect his ear from the drunken yelling. And he looks a little annoyed. I don't know if that's just like in general or if he's annoyed because him and Shane were finally vibing again and talking. And Shane kind of remarks like, that stuff's probably going to happen a lot this weekend. And turns to him, leans his direction. And again, it looks like his legs kind of bouncing. And he's just looking at Shane. And he says, it should give us a chance to get to know each other. Who knows what we might have in common? Well, if we weren't clear, he has made his continued interest clear. I also double-clicked on the what we may have in common statement, right? So again, we've been referencing them playing on the same team for the first time, what we might have in common, and them coming to this scene in the spaces that they are mentally, emotionally. Shane is, from my perspective, in the best place he's been to move with more confidence. And Ilya is in the best place that he's been in terms of like acknowledging how much he cares about Shane. And so we're in the same city, we're on the same team, what we may have in common. How can we get to a point where we close the gap? And we get another through line compliment from Ilya to Shane that you look very pretty today, acknowledging the new fit. And he follows it up with different maybe. Did somebody take you shopping? Okay. So we're asking, essentially, did Rose or one of Rose's friends, maybe Miles, take you shopping? And again, Ilya is just watching Shane. And this goes both ways, but I think in particular, Ilya at this point knows Shane's physical cues just as well as he knows his like verbal cues. And so he is watching him like a hawk for any indication of discomfort or whatever that he can use to fill in some of the blanks that maybe Shane is not going to say verbally to him right now. And Shane's like, kind of laughs and is like, if I tell you something, do you promise not to laugh? Obviously, Ilya's like, it depends. And Shane gets very serious. And he's like, no, seriously. And I wonder if Ilya is trying to like play it cool with his response, where he's like, yeah, sure, okay. Or if he assumed what was coming next was like light. And we shift to a camera shot over Shane's shoulder, where we have Ilya just soft. His expression is so relaxed, and he's just staring directly at Shane. And you see this almost like elated smile come out of him. And he goes to like, cover it up, and Shane's like, screw you. I would love to know what Ilya thought Shane was about to say, because it's entertaining that he hired a stylist. It's not that funny. And even though we get a callback to, I think it was episode 2, about when they were at Shane's place for the first time, and Ilya remarks about all of the decorative pillows on the bed and, asking if there's enough. And Shane admits to having hired a designer to help him with it. There's a parallel here, but given everything that's happened and up until this point, and I think the question that we will see following this leads me to believe that actually was probably the best answer Shane could have given, and that Ilya may have been thinking about, worried, concerned that either him and Rose were still together, or that, who knows, maybe even Miles had snuck in the interim. And we get Ilya being like, I know what you are. Because I've been watching and thinking about you. And Shane kind of like jabbing back at him, like, some of the guys in the league are so fashionable, not you. But just a genuine smile on his face. This was the reunion that we needed, or the beginning of the reunion that we needed for these two coming off the club scene. And still not satisfied that he's gotten the answer to the question that he has yet to ask. Ilya takes a deep breath, kind of looks around, and asks, so this has nothing to do with Rose Landry? And again, looks him directly in the eyes, and you can see his eyes darting back and forth across Shane's face. And as someone who has come to adore the micro expressions that we get from Shane throughout this season, investigator Ilya was there, eyes on the crime scene, waiting to see, again, any of those physical indicators that will add color to Shane's response, which is no. And as he's kind of rambling on about like, yeah, they've got good style and her friends and whatever, it was just about the clothes. You can see Ilya just like letting him finish his statement, but waiting for him to finish to then ask, so you and her are not? And Shane's like, no, she's great, but we're just not compatible. Oh my God. And at 15:40, we again get a shot over Shane's shoulder, and we just see Ilya waiting for something, kind of glancing back and forth. His eyes briefly dart down to what I'm assuming are Shane's lips and back up. And he's, again, like, it's almost like his legs bouncing, and we get this twitch in Ilya's eyebrow, and we get Shane blinking from that. It was almost like a totally subtle callback to the gym scene in episode 1 when Ilya winked at him and Shane acted as if a gust of wind had just hit him in the face. But his silence, his posture, his eye contact, there was very little that you couldn't have taken from that to be clear that that was what he was hoping to hear. And for whatever reason, Shane is a little caught off guard, doesn't know maybe how to navigate the rest of this in public, and or probably is confused about the vibes he's getting, and just says, okay, I should probably, circulate, whatever, and chooses to go. And after a few seconds of Ilya not saying anything, but just kind of staring at him, and we get a little bit of a more zoomed out shot, so we see the bar, and Ilya again is self-soothing or is having some tactile response where he's just kind of like rubbing the top of the bar with his thumb. Shane's staring forward, and I don't know if he felt awkward or whatever it was, but he's like, I should circulate, I guess, and chooses to turn in towards Ilya when he's getting out of the stool, which that choice signified to me a signifier that Shane is also still interested, but just like right now is not the time to continue this conversation. Gives him an opportunity to like physically touch Ilya without overtly doing so. And at 16:01, Ilya is like looking at Shane right in front of him, and you can feel this like magnetic need that he has just to like touch him. And he keeps his cool, and Shane kind of walks off. But as he watches him walk off, he kind of puts his hand over his mouth, and you can tell he is in his head. And it's not hopeful in an overt sense, but it is, okay, there's still a chance. And then we get one of my favorite scenes, and is a continuation for me from what we saw with him and Svetlana in terms of this like inner child getting to be released. But we've got Ilya in the pool with a bunch of kids. He's joking around with them, playing with them. And we've got Shane now out of his suit in a swimsuit and, a traditional Florida fit, sitting in the sun lounger, arms, crossed across his chest, and almost to bring Shane into this childlike state that Ilya's expressing, or maybe in between Ilya kind of letting down his guard, showing this more juvenile self that is not wrapped in armor, and them finding synergies on the ice as they're playing and smiling back and forth. I could not help myself but to take this as a moment where if they both were to sit down and earnestly write, like, what would an ideal state look like? What would perfect look like with this person? Is it that they're able to play for the same team so they don't have to be rivals anymore? And do they potentially want a family together at some point once they figure this all out? It was kind of I took it as like, if you could fast forward 5 years, right? And everything would be course corrected and you guys could be the happiest you could be. Is this representative of that? And then we get, oh my God, keep it together, bro. Them playing together. Shane taps his stick on the ice. Ilya passes to him. He scores a goal. We also get them, Shane's applauding Ilya's performance in the pool with the kids, which was just hilarious. And Ilya comes up and kisses Shane on the helmet, and they briefly separate, and it's like, they were this close to like saying fuck it and actually kissing, like for real. They are in sync. They have found this commonality, and you have this like overwhelmingly positive feeling about what they may be able to accomplish between the two of them this episode. And a little callback to thematically where we were with Svetlana and Ilya in the bedroom a couple scenes ago, where she said, well, you would make a great wing and he could be center. And this like great goal, great pass conversation, I think continues to position in a metaphorical sense that Shane, for the first time, is ultimately the decision maker about whether or not this becomes something. That he is, I mean, with him having walked out on Ilya in Boston in the last episode, and him dating Rose, and him kind of setting that nonverbal boundary with Ilya, and Ilya coming to terms with that, and coming to terms that he loves him and can't ultimately get what he wants with Shane in the way that he was doing it before, where he was much more forward, overt, dominant even. I think this is a callback to, or this is indicative of the role reversal, and that, oh God, maybe it's almost the snake and the baby analogy has reversed here, where Ilya had let his guard down when they were together in Boston. And while Shane was not vicious with him, he inadvertently hurt him by leaving, by dating Rose. And that Ilya is still sitting in this position of, I don't know how to handle it being Shane, it being a snake, because I thought I was doing everything right in Boston, and yet I got bit. I hadn't thought about that. And Ilya getting out of the pool and just like shaking on Shane. The first image that came to mind was like, he's trying to show that he's a yellow lab disguised as a pit bull. That, like, I don't know if any of you have Goldens or yellow labs, but they love to freaking swim. And they get out of the pool and they come over to you to say hi, and then they shake and they just get you all wet. I'm sure there are many other dogs who do that, just from my experience. And that moment was intentional and cute and endearing, and again playing into this like levity, and even like saying, jokingly telling Shane, hey, give these kids some money because I forgot my wallet. It's almost like an early signifier that like, I can rely on you. I don't know. The last like minute and a half here felt dreamlike, felt like when you go to bed at night and you envision what your life could be with someone, and they both feel incredibly comfortable, even just like, cosplaying as this entity. And in a rom-com-y way, we've got Shane sitting on the beach watching the sunset, I'm sure just trying to like either quiet all of the thoughts or wrangle all of the thoughts and feelings that have crept up in the last couple days since he's been in Florida. And our boy Ilya spotted him on the beach and comes over to join him. And with it being sunset, that also can signify the end of this engagement, right? They ride these wild highs and lows when they know they're going to be together, they're going to be in the same city, they're going to be playing one another, or in this case, playing with one another. And that always the end of that brief time together has been the opportunity and the space for things to go wrong, to go off, to leave things unsaid, to introduce risk to the next time that they're together. And Ilya saying, I found you, is, potentially indicating that he doesn't want this just to be the end. He has Shane's phone number. Whether or not Shane would respond is what it is, but he physically found him and went to go sit next to him and talk to him as this idyllic time together is coming to an end. And again, coming back to show intentionality and say without saying that knowing the state of the relationship that Rose and Shane has is important to him, Ilya brings up that, oh, I looked up that word, compatible. And he says, I thought I knew what it meant, but I wanted to be sure. And again, glancing across the script, English is obviously Ilya's second language. Compatible is probably not an English word that is used often. And so it would be totally normal for him to double check what that meant. The phrasing in the context of this held a lot more meaning to me, especially on the word sure. So when we got the scene with Rose and Shane, where she asks, do you like kissing me? And he said, sure. It was a slipped moment of truth, right? Then in this context, Ilya wants to make sure that he has all of the facts straight so that if he is to be bold and he is to be abnormally open or vulnerable with Shane about moving this in some way, or even just reigniting this and or pushing it in a different direction, he wanted to be sure that he still had a shot at it, and confirms again. So you and Rose are not, Shane finishes the sentence, yeah, not compatible. And that was all Ilya had been hoping for, wanting, he briefly glances back, but he wants to touch Shane and hold Shane so bad that he slides his hand over in the sand and kind of rubs his thumb on him as a bold and very clear signifier for Shane that even without saying that he may be Shane's first choice. And right as their thumbs touch, Shane kind of like takes a deep breath and pauses and asks what room Ilya's in. And I think it would be easy for us to assume that they're just going to slip back into old habits, right? Like, let's hook up, we're here. We see very shortly that actually that deep breath is him trying to muster up the courage to try and have the conversation he's going to try and have with Ilya. All right, we are now moving on to coming out again, round 2. We've got somewhat serious Shane coming in. He's now found a Hawaiian shirt, which is hilarious. And he's doing his version of posturing, which is he's got his thumbs in his pockets and he would like them to sit down and have a conversation. And he definitely looks a little bit distraught, which obviously Ilya picks up on fairly quickly. As we know, they have tended to jump back into each other's arms and like immediately move into physicality. And not sure that was necessarily what Ilya was expecting, but he kind of leans up against this wall at 1934, and you see him like pull side of his face like, shit, what is this? And he's like, this looks serious. Shane can't figure out where's up, so he's like, not, well, I guess it is, just can you please sit down? And I think for the first time, we are seeing Ilya take that request and actually kind of sit on the dresser, and you can see his body tense, right? The soft levity that we had seen even when they first were kind of reunited at the bar in Ilya's face. His shoulders are up, his arms are tensed, his face is tense, and he appears to be bracing for impact. I don't know what he may have thought Shane's intentions were here, but you can definitely feel him recoiling into like a protective state, self-protective state, which, I mean, is totally understandable. And Shane opens us up with a very vague question. It's not just me, right? And even if we didn't have the language barrier between the two of them, I think it would be totally normal for the other person receiving that to be like, what? Like, what are we talking about here? And another vague question, you feel it too, don't you? at this point you can start using context clues to put things together, but still, I think part of this is Ilya needs Shane to say what he wants, what he thinks. And so he follows up with feel what, right? Like say the thing. And Shane says the last time we were together, it was different. Calling back to Boston. And Ilya recoils even further. Again, we get his tell that he's retreating and or lying a bit. And he like rubs his nose and he goes, felt what? You ran away. And Shane, not to be deterred by that, is like, listen, I am sorry for the way that went, right? He didn't even get kind of the rest of the sentence out. And Ilya, almost to like make sure he doesn't continue the statement, is like, what, you freaked out over nothing, right? Nothing was different, nothing changed. And this to me is such a incredibly pivotal moment for Shane as a character, that he does not retreat. He leans in and is like, it wasn't nothing. Like, I'm not going to let you get away with saying that. And like, I know you would love for me to like retreat but no, don't act like that. Okay. This is hard enough to be having this conversation because it is the first time, at least from Shane's perspective, that he is trying to initiate, this level of conversation. And it's like, it's hard enough without you being an asshole. Just like, meet me. We've been this way the last couple days together. Why all of a sudden am I getting old you? I want the person that I've been interacting with the last couple days in this conversation with me. And Ilya, I think, worried about where this conversation may or may not be going, is like, what do you want? Listen, we get together, we it's simple, it's whatever. And it flows off his tongue and his body language is, giving it, but it's so clearly a defense mechanism, a mask, a script that he has told himself, that he has trained himself to use. And again, Shane just is not going to let him get away with that. And Shane retorts like, this is simple. And Ilya's like, it's simple for me. It's like, I get it. Okay. He's scared. And we get Shane following that up with, I think, and there is a pregnant pause. And we get Shane coming out to Ilya and saying, I think I'm gay. To which Ilya laughs and is like, oh, you think so? I will admit that was not the statement that I thought was going to come out of Shane's mouth. I may have, in Ilya's shoes, like cracked a smile. But I think Ilya probably thought there was a much more revolutionary statement maybe that was going to be made. I could see how, if you let your mind wander, this could have been the time that Shane, if he felt that way, wanted to tell Ilya that like, I love you. And so like, I can't do this like friends with benefits or rivals with benefits thing anymore. And I don't know what was running through Ilya's head, but it while totally important for Shane to have this moment, to say it out loud, to say it to him, I do remember on watching and then rewatching, thinking like, what could have followed those two first words in the sentence. There were many ways that ad libs could have maybe matched what the vibe was, the fear was potentially, the anxiety was that Shane is physically portraying at this point in time. And not trying to necessarily diminish the moment or whatever. He's like, you're gay, so what? Like, we have literally been hooking up for 10 years at this point. And Shane, trying to be vulnerable, is like, well, it's kind of a big deal for me, at least. and is like, I'm sorry if I'm being boring again. And Ilya kind of folds forward. His hands are just kind of like dangling on his quads, and you can hear him like, and on first watch, that was more interpreted by me as like if I was to put words to it, like, oh my God, this kid is freaking out over nothing, right? Almost in like a mild annoyance. However, him then immediately pushing off of the dresser to go sit on the bed next to Shane, that like grunt was more of a physical representation of a shift for him from your being defense mechanism Ilya to this guy that you love. I'm just going to, that's where we're at here. He sees that this was a big thing for Shane. This was a vulnerable moment for Shane, and that he can't help but try and be there for him is maybe the wrong way, like make him feel better. And the first thing he can think of is like, okay, I'm going to close the distance between us. I'm going to go sit by him because he can't help but crumble a bit from a facade perspective when he sees Shane hurt or upset. And even though I had very strong feelings about the scene I'm about to talk about, and shared them very loudly on my deep dive, the bathroom scene in Vegas, I was very upset with Ilya. But people have pointed out that there's a moment when Shane finally shows that emotion back and that hurt back to Ilya. He's almost like magnetized to him that he can't help but try and calm him down and whatever. Similar sort of line here. And when he kind of like sits on the bed next to him, and they're both just kind of sitting there like this, staring forward, kind of blank and nervous. There was like a brief callback to, I want to say it was Heartstopper, maybe when they're first like beginning to come out to one another. But this felt very juvenile, and not necessarily in a negative way, but more representing where they are both at in their like coming out journeys, which is nearly infantile. If you just aged them down to like 16 or 17 or 18, and you have somehow accidentally found the first guy you like that was willing to experiment with you or whatever. And Ilya, again, trying to get to the answer underneath the answer, is like, why are you telling me this? Right? Like we have been physically intimate as two men many, many times at this point. Like none of this is this to Ilya does not feel like net new information, right? And Shane comes back with, who else am I going to tell? Like, you are the person that I have come to this conclusion about. And it's subtle, but as Shane then begins to continue and say, it's not just being gay, Ilya goes from kind of being shoulders forward to he kind of slides his hand that's closest to Shane back a little bit, kind of opening up his posture to him, not yet looking at him, but physically portraying that he is almost open for the continued conversation in a way. And he says, it's not just being gay, it's you, which if we rewind to episode 2 in Montreal, that song that ripped my entire heart and soul out of my body by Peter, entitled It's You, immediately brought me back to that scene when potentially it was meant to demonstrate that at that point, Shane knew, and God, how many years have passed, and he's finally able to say this to him. It's being gay is one thing, but effing your arch rival is another thing. And I think it's clear that that's not what's bothering him, that the arch rival dynamic exists. It is obviously much deeper than that, and trying to maybe course correct us back to a place of safety, a place that they had agreed upon. It's like, yeah, that's why it's a secret. And again, circling back, Shane's like, no, but last time, and again, we get a second apology. Like, I am sorry I freaked out. Okay. Making sure that he heard that and making sure that it's clear that that was not intentional or planned. And he says, but before that, and there's a pause, and he says, it was nice. And he looks to Ilya, and again, not able to look Shane in the face, very subtly acknowledges it and just like shakes his head yes and says, it was. Admitting that he did feel different, that it was different also for him, and almost confirming for Shane that the confusion he felt in Boston that day with Ilya was triggered by real feelings and a shared experience, not something that maybe he overread or overthought, right? If you put yourself in Shane's shoes, and go back to Boston episode 4, and you're with someone who has consistently held the line of, this is just physical, this is just fun, this is just a plan to, and you know that you're catching deeper feelings, and that you want, or you potentially want those to be reciprocated in a more meaningful way. It is easy, I think, to walk yourself into a corner and say, you're making this up. Him making you a tuna melt actually doesn't mean anything. It feels like it means something. Maybe I'm overreading it, right? Or maybe him pulling me into his chest and playing with my hair was just like, I can immediately transport myself back into these like chaotic moments in life where honestly, most of the time I was wrong about what I thought I was experiencing or what I thought was happening between me and someone else. Often with straight men, which is an important component to that story. But regardless, Shane now gets confirmation, right, that Ilya was feeling it too, and that your perception of this shift, which ultimately scared you, was true, was real, and that must have been such a relief to him in that moment, which then gives him the confidence to continue. He verbally or audibly swallows and says, it felt like we were something. Again, we're tiptoeing towards one another inside this conversation, not even saying like we were a couple or that it was deeper than this. Even just labeling it as something is him inching towards Ilya, and even though I guarantee you Ilya's heart rate right now is like the 160s. Again, stoic, forward facing. He's like, we can't be something. Hollander, thank you for reconfirming that we are at last name basis, not first name basis right now. And I was so proud of Shane in this moment, asking the question, would you want to be if we could? And especially for the two of them who are in this seemingly impossible situation where they are both professional athletes in the closet, pitted against one another in the public, even knowing that in an alternate universe, maybe one that looks similar to what we saw earlier this episode by the pool and playing together, would you want to be, right? Is that even not even in the realm of the next, like, especially at this point, right, foreseeable future, but even in an alternate universe, is that something that you would potentially want? And Ilya's like, we can't. And Shane won't let up, and not letting Ilya off is like, that's not what I asked. Right. I think from Shane's perspective, he feels like I equally understand how far fetched this question is. I just need to know this. And Ilya kind of strikes back and is like, why does it matter? And Shane goes from kind of watching him to, taking a little bit of aback and is physically semi-retreated. And Shane answers Ilya's question. And he's like, I don't think I can pretend I don't like you anymore. And even though I know deep down, that has in some weird, deep, dark cavern in Ilya's heart, made him so happy. He is immediately kind of met with the reality that even by allowing himself to play pretend in that space, he can't lean in. And in an attempt to point Shane in another direction, he's like, you don't like me, right? Like, come on, let's not do that. And we get this shot over now Ilya's shoulder with Shane's face. And he is ready to make it clear. Like, yeah, I do. I think I like you maybe a little bit too much. And by taking it even just like that little bit next step to insinuate that like could be love or something, deeper, Ilya is like, don't do that. Don't. I'm not. You're not what, Ilya? Because that's not an I don't. And Ilya begins to share like the reasons why he feels he can't meet Shane where he's at right now, which is I could never go home again. And Shane asks, what would happen to you? And we see the first crack from Ilya as he's saying, I don't know, and I don't want to find out. Signifying, I think, or highlighting for the first time for Shane that his hunch has been correct. That all of the times that Shane has asked, do you feel safe there? Are you happy there? Do you want to go back there? Do you, over all these episodes, Ilya for the first time admitting in some way, shape, or form that there is imminent danger and risk. That is the reason he can't meet Shane where he is in this moment necessarily. And, Shane coming from what seems to be a very supportive and loving family is, begins to ask more questions about Ilya's family. Like, okay, I know that Russia isn't safe, but like naturally, wouldn't your family insulate, help you? And we get Ilya, informing us that both his dad and his brother are police. Like, they're out of the equation, even if we didn't know who they were right at this point. Their jobs are aligned with work that would, in theory, be linked to tapping phones and surveilling people and trying to find those breaking the law, which includes being gay. And in this moment of admission, Shane, I think, likely relying on his experience and even just, thematically, maternal love. Even if your dad and your brother are that way, what about your mother? And we get Ilya uncomfortable, but opening up to Shane and admitting that his mom is dead, that it happened when he was young. And he pivots away from the mom topic back to his dad, but also in a way that now we're again sharing additional information, and that, he's old fashioned, he's sick, he has dementia, and almost in a way to like meet Shane's authenticity in this moment, right? When like he's coming in and he's naming that he's gay, that he likes Ilya, he likes him too much. Ilya is meeting him in the same like plane, not on the same level here, but is admitting something and putting a name to something that he likely hasn't been able to bring himself to say out loud. And that in a way he is trusting Shane with very personal information and something that he is struggling with. And almost in this way, swapping, like, it's not just you sharing something with me. I also have something to share. And by sharing that, by saying that out loud, and then immediately getting a very gentle response back from Shane that that's awful. Ilya crumbles. And you can see his face evolve like second by second from like 2350. To me, the acting choices just very clearly signify that he has not said that out loud to anyone. And just the act of saying it has made it more real, has allowed a flood of emotions that he had been trying to keep at bay away. And in trying to remain strong and not rely on anyone and not demonstrate behavior that he probably was deeply criticized for as a child, he goes to turn away so that Shane can't see him cry. And Shane jumps immediately into action, and we hear this like heartbreaking "I'm sorry" from Ilya as his voice is breaking. Positioned in a way that he's apologizing for breaking down, but could be overread as just a generalized apology for not letting him in X, Y, and Z. And Shane just jumps in his lap and picks up his face and kisses him and pulls him in into a hug and embrace. And we get this shot at 24:13 where Ilya is hugging him and crying and is allowing himself to break down, probably for the first time since his mom died. And you can see him wrapped, his arms are wrapped around Shane and just totally leaning into the moment of, I'm sure, exceptionally overdue comfort and release. I also really love the way that we actually don't see them get intimate with one another. It is clearly insinuated because Ilya's on the bed in his boxers, whatever. But that I think that was really important in terms of storytelling, in that the last time they started to get in this realm of deeper emotional intimacy was in Boston when Ilya had just gotten off the phone with his dad, came back into the room and kind of pulled him in. Shane, not knowing how to handle the chaos of what had happened that day or whatever, leaned into the physical. And this is, to me, this scene read as like, no, they are emotionally assisting one another through this time. And that totally normal that they took the opportunity to physically be together because they so rarely are physically together, but that it didn't need to be said, it didn't need to be seen. It was something between the two of them, and that the importance was the emotional evolution that has happened in these last couple minutes. And we see Ilya just sitting in bed, content and smiling, and almost looking at Shane like, what did I do? And not in a regrettable way, but in a holy shit, I broke that barrier with someone, and I did it with him, this guy that haven't said it yet, that I love. And as if we needed any sort of additional reassurance as viewers here, we have Shane at the door kind of smiling back at Ilya And Ilya says, and he kind of like looks at him and sees that he's just kind of like staring and smiling at Shane at the door. And he's like, what? And Ilya's like, nothing. Good night, Shane. And we get a good night, Ilya, and a smile. And if I was to classify my interpretation of where both of them are at in this moment, Ilya is in awe and Shane is relieved. Ilya, for the first time, invited someone in, and they absolutely did not disappoint. And I'm sure overshot his expectations. And Shane was finally able to force his way through saying the things and admitting the things that he's been wanting to say to Ilya for so long. And in doing so, got to experience an even deeper emotional level with him as a result. And now we move on to the pregame. We're a couple weeks later. We're back in Boston. And Lily is texting. Hayden, of course, is making his joke as he leaves, like, hey, Boston Lily's texting you, have fun. And Shane begins to be like, it's not. And Hayden's like, I don't care. It's like a little comic relief. And we get Shane picking up his phone. Hey, what time do you leave? Why? Early. Okay. Come over before the game. And as if we did not already know that they are completely magnetized to one another at this point. He's saying, I can't. We have a game tonight. And as he's doing it, he's focused for them early on was physical. And that's why we saw the full multi-minute, scenes with them. And that this is a component of what we've got going on now, but it is secondary or tertiary. The emotional aspect of this is officially kind of taking over. And of course, we have a call from Alexei, which we decline. And without prompting, Ilya shares. He's like, ugh, my brother. And of course, being polite, Shane's like, you can take it if you want to. And I was like, no, I don't want to. Which is, again, a sort of first breadcrumb for Shane that, like, the relationship there is at the very least strained. And he, kind of looks Ilya up and down. He's clearly physically uncomfortable and kind of in his head a bit. And Shane leans in. It's like, hey, well, is everything okay at home? And asks about his dad. It's like, that was all the sharing that Ilya was comfortable with for the day. And so he just kind of politely is like, enough, okay? You have too many questions. And Shane apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry. And Ilya reaffirms him with, it's okay. Like, without saying it, I know you're coming from a good place. I just, like, mentally can't get there today. Obviously super comfortable in the situation that they're in right now. Ilya's rubbing Shane's knee and they're just kind of like hanging out in bed together. And Shane pulls up some yolks. He's like, hey, if I wasn't clear, I'm sorry in advance for tonight's game. We're going to destroy you guys. And just like, he didn't miss his comedic timing was like perfect off of this. Which clearly catches Ilya off guard. He's like, oh, so you're the asshole. No, it's still you. And he just gets up to make a proclamation to the non-existent crowd. Everyone, Shane Hollander is an asshole. And they're just like goofing and smiling and, our boys are happy. We go to the night game that followed the pregame lovin'. We get, again, a dismissed call from Alexei. And I think almost in a way to take one more piece out of their visual story of what we're seeing, we don't even know who won against who. We get Ilya coming back into the locker room, light and joking with the team. His phone's ringing again, so he goes to answer it. But again, we're starting to dissolve the full sex scenes. We're also not seeing them beating each other on the ice or who won that game versus that game because it's irrelevant now. That rivalry perspective between the two of them is less and less important, less and less prominent, which I think is amazing. And we move on to the next chapter, which is a loss. We see Ilya go to grab his phone. It's ringing again, and the scene kind of cuts out along with the music, seemingly answering Alexei's call with, "What the F do you want?" And we cut to the next day. And one of Shane's teammates just brings up that, hey, Ilya didn't actually fly with his team to Nashville, which is the next stop. Obviously the reasons that you would start to put together being in the league is, oh, were they hurt? Da da da. And Shane, almost like showing his cards a bit, is like, he wasn't sick. It's like, okay, well, but instantly you can tell he's panicked and goes to text him and wants to make sure he's okay. And again, some of the artistry of this show is like, if you don't have subtitles on, you are missing so much. And I'm not even going to pretend to know what language his teammate was speaking. Something from Latin America is my guess. But he basically says, calm down, to Shane as he's like kind of frantically texting. And obviously texts him, are you okay? And we get a shot of Shane later that day back at his place. Again, kind of like checking the phone, nervous. And I think I'll speak for myself, but I think this is a shared experience. Those moments when something happens, right? And you text someone and all your brain can do is spiral. And all you can do is open your phone and refresh it, and open your phone and refresh it. And the torture of being in that situation, not knowing what's going on, was a very visceral experience. Like rewatching this, it's like I immediately shot back to like multiple times in my life where I was Shane, sitting and refreshing, and he's trying to navigate what they've done thus far, right? They have texted one another infrequently, gotten together, hooked up. Clearly we've moved the needle here. But he is like, yeah, I need to do something. And so he calls Ilya. Like, freaking out. You're not responding to my text. Like, maybe if I call, he'll answer. He doesn't. And Ilya, his voicemail recording is literal perfection. Like, I need to actually change my voicemail inbox to that. And we get this shot of Shane back in bed. He's reading, but he looks tense, and not, because of the content that he's reading. He's trying to actually like distract himself with the storyline, which doesn't appear to be working. We hear the phone buzz and immediately look down, grab the phone, and he answers, "Hey, are you okay?" Like, clearly he is so worried for Ilya. And my first read on the rest of this short scene that we see with them, I chalked it up to a little bit of emotional regression from Ilya, but I think actually in watching it, this flirtatious sexual line that we'll tow here for the next couple of seconds could be interpreted the way I did. But I think that it's important that I, as a viewer, recognize that he called Shane back, because that is growth for him. And that he, even though he's reaching out to him for support in a way that is reminiscent of earlier years of their engagement, he is reaching out, and that is growth from our boy. And of course, he clues in on the glasses. I don't know what it is with these hockey bros and liking boys in glasses, but it's clearly a thing. And Ilya is just gooning at the phone, and seeing Shane just clearly made him feel so much better. And I guess, very excited about this glasses situation. And it's almost as if like we needed to bring this levity to the conversation. Shane asks the question, is your father blank? Ilya finishes the rest of the sentence with yes, dead. They have definitely maintained the I don't know why this is the only way I can think about it, but like the emotional security clearance with one another based on their last interaction, where Shane can ask that question, Ilya can answer it, and that this obviously traumatic life event has not scared Ilya off or sent him into kind of a retractive spiral. And I'll talk about this later in the episode, but I think that in a way, his dad's death, not that he wanted that to happen by any stretch of the imagination, but represents a meaningful opportunity for freedom. And obviously we get a heartfelt, like, I'm so sorry from Shane. And almost in a healthy dissociative state, Ilya's like, yeah, okay, so what are people saying about me? Don't worry, I'll be back by the end of the week. And in this perfect yin and yang, Shane's like, you should take more time than that. Like, don't just rush back. Like, even though you're playing it off like it doesn't bother you or whatever it is, you're a human being and you have human emotions and you need to like take some time. Of course, it's like, oh, well, so you can catch up to me in the scoring game. It's like, bro, no. And Shane just says back, I'm being serious. And there is no chance in hell Shane would have felt the autonomy or leeway to have that blunt of an interaction with Ilya about something like this, had we not had the last scene in the hotel. And Shane follows it up with, again, a very sincere, heartfelt, you can talk to me about whatever. I want to help if I can. And although Ilya is not taking him up on that right now and would rather see him Clark Kent in his birthday suit, I think it leaves room for what we end up seeing later this episode. We cut to a shot of Ilya. Obviously, we'll point to Jacob because of the show. But similar to, I think, how I felt in the bathroom with Sasha, which must have been episode 2, is this like, I know you are having a lot of big feelings right now, okay? You just lost your dad. There are a million pressures on you, which he does further articulate later in this episode. But please don't, like, as a viewer, I'm just like, please don't spiral. Like, please don't numb. Please don't, within reason, right? Please don't let this be the next thing that derails you two, because you've come so far. And usually mid-episode, they like to take us on a roller coaster, and I am not a fan of roller coasters. But I do, kind of rewatching it through, it definitely reads as this like somber moment when he's collecting himself before going to the funeral. And whether he recognizes it in this moment or not, there's also a death of ownership is the wrong authoritarian direction of his like demanded physical tie to Russia. There's no question that obviously he is, going through some emotional turmoil and loss. But I think that part of an unspoken or even unnamed addition to the chaos is now you've had this very overbearing father, who to what he said was old school and X, Y, and Z, and clearly very devout to Russia and X, Y, and Z. That even though overall I think it will benefit him as a person to be free of some of that new freedom is also somewhat destabilizing. We then cut to what appears to be a post-funeral meal. I am not even going to pretend to pronounce this word, but there's a tradition in Russia that it's kind of the post-funeral dinners, Pominkeki, and clearly it's a somber event. We have Ilya and Alexei catching each other. A lot of repression throughout his childhood, whether that was from his dad, from his older brother, from the world around him. Being authentic, saying the thing he wants to say, reacting the way he wants to react. This is a very subtle reminder that he's not allowed to do that, right? What if other people hear? What if other people would ever perceive our family as being in conflict at dad's funeral when they live in conflict? And that Alexei feels as if he is in a position of power to demand a plan, to demand answers and handouts. And Ilya responds to that, not even in the absurdity that it's positioned, but even like from a humanistic point of view. I don't know. He just died. I have not been able to wrap my mind around the economics of this, bro. What the hell? Like, he's fresh in the ground. And in a roundabout way, Ilya asks for grace and says, Can I get a second to breathe? Like, I have not been able to get to that yet. And the manipulation is just so grossly apparent with the way Alexei responds. What about me? Do I get to breathe? What, turning it around on him as if you're the golden boy who life is so perfect for. How could this be hard for you? I'm out here struggling, and you're not thinking about what's more important, which is me and my kid and my wife. And it's all an act. It's all a farce. We know he has snorted his way through tens of thousands of dollars of coke on Ilya's back. We know that, and we get a nice little F-bomb thrown around again, and is like, how does it feel to be that abandons their family? And that was the button that he should not have pressed. Because while we haven't yet explicitly heard Ilya's feelings on his inability to be back in Russia taking care of his father in his final days, he has been fully supporting at least Alexei and his family the whole time, and financially. And in order to do so, he has to be in the U.S. playing hockey. And Alexei throws it back in Ilya's face that I've spent the last however many months every day taking care of dad, seemingly forgetting that he's being paid to do so. And that clearly struck a chord with Ilya. He is hurt. He's starting to tear up. And Svetlana, having already heard some raised voices, comes back and tries to cut the tension. And Alexei makes the ultimate wrong decision in basically calling Svetlana a whore. And Ilya loses it, and just his face erupting at 32:22. The rage that was unlocked by that moment in him, I am actually so surprised he was able to restrain himself as he's standing with Alexei pinned against the wall, his fist up. I mean, he stood zero chance. And while I acknowledge it's his brother, there's something obviously much, much deeper there between the two of them. There is a level of restraint that he was able to demonstrate in that moment that I don't think I would be able to especially in the moment when everything is so heightened. But he is able to hold himself back from beating the shit out of Alexei. And I don't think anyone with knowledge of what all happened would have been sad to have seen him walk out with a black eye. But in some weird way, deep down, Ilya still loves his brother, even if it is in essentially no way reciprocal. And almost in a moment of needing or wanting reassurance, he looks over at Svetlana, who is just kind of composed and looking back at him. He finally has the bravado to say what he needs to say, which is, "You can have my apartment. There will be a trust for my niece when she turns 18, and you will never contact me again. And if you do, I will use every piece of my fame, money, and notoriety to make sure that you can." Sets the tone and shifts the power dynamic to what realistically is and has been happening. In no way am I diminishing the fallout or residual scar tissue that Ilya will likely end up feeling around this decision, because even though he's family and he sucks, you're still losing a brother. But it was the first time, especially on Russian soil, that we see Ilya defining his destiny, defining what is or is not going to work for him. And it's not, I get to go to, this is an incorrect statement, seeing he's in Russia for the summers, but summer camp all year and then come back to reality. It's he actually can't even do that anymore. He can't take the turmoil and the chaos of being back. And something that as we get to the end of this episode made me kind of ping back to here is him giving his apartment to Alexei and his family. Again, not knowing his dad's living situation or family, real estate, or any of that. Him giving his apartment to Alexei means he has nowhere to go when he comes back, other than staying in a hotel, which I guess if your summer is 2 weeks long, like, that's not a big deal. But I think it is significant that in this exchange, he is willing to give up his home in this country, almost in a way in which it doesn't matter to him anymore. But we'll talk about that more in the end. And at 33, 36, we see Alexei, putting himself back together in the mirror to go rejoin the funeral dinner. And the physical acting of Connor's story over these next couple of seconds is utter perfection. If you are lucky enough to have never been in a situation where you are so mad, emotionally stirred up, that your heart rate is pulsing in your neck, and or you just haven't looked in the mirror when that's happened, actually those like heartbeat waves can actually manifest in like your head moving and or shaking. And in these few seconds, as he's finally said the thing, he's finally cut ties, he's finally stated his demands, it feels like he is overwhelmed by adrenaline in this moment. And that almost is then amplified by almost a subconscious feeling of like, what have I done? Because his head is moving, which to me could be simply just the adrenaline. But it's almost like he's got this like tiny shake of his head, as if he's like saying no, whether that's him physically telling himself not to go back after Alexei or to not retract it, or even if it's somewhat more of a what have you done type of moment. Connor knocked this one out of the park. Also super random cut here, because I always forget to do this. If you have made it this far in, which we've been recording for 4 hours and 45 minutes, we'll see where you're at timestamp wise. And you're enjoying this. Sorry for the like YouTuber stuff, but like give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell. And also, if you guys actually have made it this far in and you are clearly a huge HR fan, I'm trying to find other little pockets of the internet where we can post these videos and things and get even more people to come join us and have fun. I literally started a TikTok to post some of this content, and that's been super fun. So if you have any suggestions, I think someone had mentioned that maybe Threads was a great place to do it. Let me know. Also, if you happen to like share my videos or anything anywhere else, like tag me in it. I would love to see that. I'd love to throw an extra like on it. But I digress. Back to Russia. All right. And we are transitioning to the monologue. If you follow the time point that you've been given, you will realize that we have not started the monologue yet. And that is because on rewatching, I think that this conversation with Svetlana, married with the last conversation we saw him have with Shane, where Shane said, "You can talk to me about anything. I just want to be able to help if I can." I believe that that moment, married with what we're about to see, was the formula to get Ilya to a point that he would make that call to Shane. And so we get Ilya, obviously, in a not so roundabout way, thanking Svetlana for everything. But, you know, given what has happened over the last 60 seconds coming in and being there for him in that interaction with Alexei, is like, you know, "I don't deserve you." And she says, "You do, but you don't want me." And from I'm sitting in, you know, the raft in the lazy river approach to the show, it seems like, well, why kick him when he's down, right? Why take this moment of all moments to push? But in retrospect, I think that there's something very important about major moments of change and shift and perceived instability. And that actually those are the moments where you can make the biggest changes, obviously for better or for worse. Here we're clearly driving to for better. But I vividly and explicitly remember I moved from Chicago to Wisconsin as a junior in high school. And when you grow up going to school with all the same kids, and you can't outrun the stereotypes or the rumors or the perceptions that have happened over time as you're growing up as a kid into a teenager. And I remember thinking there was something so almost like superhuman about moving to a place where no one knew you and you could show up in that moment as your current self without the baggage of past self, or even show up as the person that you ultimately want to become in hopes that that becomes the expectations of the people around you and that you naturally evolve to that state. And ever since then, every time there's a big shift in my life, whether that's changing careers or whatever the hell, I always lean into those moments as it's going to be chaotic anyways. Let's take this moment to move ourselves up the Candyland ladder, 12 spots instead of 2. And from obviously given the perspective that I just shared, it almost feels like Svetlana knows this is one of those critical inflection points for Ilya, and that she needs to be a good friend and not a gentle friend in this moment, and push him out of the nest per se. And Ilya, not in trying to necessarily react to Svetlana, but I think more of just like reaffirm his genuine love for her. It's like, I love you. Ilya's kind of stunned into silence. He goes to try and respond. He gets, his lips separated. And she just kind of stops him in his tracks and says, I love you too. And whatever you need, I will be here. Which is so beautiful. And words he likely has not heard ever since his mom passed away. And tripling down, I'm not going anywhere. Okay. Like, you've got me. And we're done dancing around the bush here. I just hope Jane knows how lucky he is. Confirmed. She knows. She's not saying it. She's giving you the space, but she knows, and she also has put together that it's Shane. And almost in a mix of almost like an Elena and Rose Venn diagram. She is tender. She is supportive in this, but she also is being firm, because my guess is that she has watched him be in turmoil for all these years and recognizes the opportunity ahead of him, albeit at the fate of his dad not being around anymore, that, again, this is the time to test those wings and fly the nest. Again, followed up with a kiss, which we also saw with Rose and Shane outside of the restaurant as they are committing to being friends after realizing that they were not compatible. I'm not stating the same here, but a shot choice nonetheless. And a similar sort of physical resetting that we saw in Boston when Ilya had gotten off the phone with his dad. He kind of like shook his arms out and like took a deep breath and then walked back into the room with Shane. Here we see him physically trying to like get his head out of the space that he's in so that he can rejoin the post-funeral dinner. We then see that Ilya has texted Shane asking him if he was alone, and Shane's frantically trying to get out of the hotel room. Obviously he's somewhere with Hayden. He doesn't even get the sentence out like, hey, I'm just gonna, and Hayden's like, have fun, right? Which up until this point, right, represents maybe what Shane and Ilya's relationship was. Clearly this is going to be a very pivotal moment in their emotional connection. And when someone like Ilya is reaching out and, even just texts you, hey, are you alone? Can I call you? That is, for him, massive vulnerability and just like demonstrating that for the very first time, he like wants to lean into you. He doesn't know that yet because he hasn't answered the phone, but it's a big moment. And even just the choice that the second Shane responds with, yes, you can call me, the phone starts ringing. It's not this delayed, I'm trying to like play something out. It's, I was standing with my phone in my hand, hoping I could call you. Please say yes so that I can call you. And I love that Shane skips the hey, hi. He just jumps immediately to what he's the most worried about, which is, how are you? And there's been this triadic, is that a word? Triadic? Word for things in threes? Oh, maybe that's how triadic. Yes. So, okay. Sorry. There is this triadic language pattern that we see from Ilya. I'm assuming that a part of it is part of, English being his second language. But we get him responding to Shane's question about how he is with, okay, not good, probably bad. And it's almost like it's, in this moment, meant to ease Shane in, that he doesn't jump to bad, but he's like, no, okay, realistically, this is where we're at. But that we see it multiple times across the season, and I'm blanking right now in where else we've seen it. But it is, there's a cadence of his voice when he's doing these things that is like ringing the bell in the back of my head. And I think from this next line on, we know that Ilya is truly opening up to Shane, right? He asks, how's your family? Probably at their worst, right? These are things that are reserved for those closest in your life that you trust and can tell the real shit to, right? This isn't some lighthearted, conversation with a hookup. These are relationship conversations. And we get a bit of self-reflection. Maybe you could classify it as guilt, where Ilya's like, my brother's scared. It makes him terrible, and it makes me terrible back, right? Indicating that he isn't thrilled with the version of himself that showed up in that back room at the dinner. I don't, obviously, not having any of the background in any depth from the show's perspective of maybe them as brothers had a super tight bond for a long time, and then maybe it was, his mother's death or something else that happened that disrupted that relationship. I can totally understand that even if it's been so infuriating for so many years, there's still this like deep down bond of the people you used to be, the relationship you used to have with one another, that you would mourn and want to, even in these moments where, from my perspective, that was the right reaction. You have to protect yourself. Alexei is portrayed as a manipulative, somewhat abusive character in his life, and that actually being free of that while sad is ultimately probably the right choice. But even, seemingly moments after this explosion with him, Ilya, in his second language, can even reflect on the fact that he's not happy with the way that went down, regardless of whether or not it was the right decision. And as we know, this monologue brings out a lot of emotions, which I'm going to try to keep under control for this analysis. Maybe I'm upset about the wrong thing. I have full body chills. Maybe I wish it could be different. I wish he could know me. There is definitely something in the finality of someone passing away that, regardless of the roles they've played or whatever, you can have this moment where you wish you had foresight to know that this was going to happen, and that maybe you could have said the thing, you could have done the thing, you could have had that experience with them or not. I think this is a globally experienced sensation when you lose someone, but particularly for Ilya in this. I was somewhat surprised, and I don't know, in retrospect, it's equally as confusing. But in him making the statement, is it that he wishes he would have come out to his dad? Because given the background that we know, I can't bring myself to think that that's true. But also, suspending disbelief. There, I think, is always a what if for people who have less than optimized parents in their life, that even though you can recognize the reality of who they are and what they bring to the table, you still ache for a quote unquote normal experience that, obviously this is through a Western view, where you have a loving mom and a loving dad, and they're there behind the white picket fence to, help you through your things, and they support you no matter what. And that is so exceptionally antithetical to Ilya's existence and his lived experience. That statement out of his mouth, I didn't quite know where to place it. I don't know if it's maybe he has progressed personally and has seen life outside of maybe the confines that his dad was stuck within, that maybe he can generate a version of his dad that did love him, that could have shown him love in that way, and that in this idyllic space, maybe he could have seen Ilya for who he actually is. I am very grateful that I in no way, shape, or form can relate to this personally. My parents have celebrated everything that me and also my sister have accomplished and done, and actually, when I told them that I was going to med school, I think they may have been the first parents on earth that I wouldn't say were disappointed. They weren't. But I had expressed so much joy and love in creative spaces and art and other things that I think they had probably assumed that would be the path that I took. They always left it totally up to us for, go and do the things that you love, do what drives you, brings you joy. And somehow out of that, they got a doctor and a lawyer for kids. But again, back to the scene, it struck me, it generated friction in my brain trying to understand where Ilya was trying to get with that statement. And there are probably subtexts that I don't understand because I grew up in a healthy family environment. But in the most overly romanticized version, you could interpret that as, I wish my dad could have known the real me, loved the real me, and in time loved who I love. And even him acknowledging that English is too hard right now is, for him, a radical admission of overstimulation, too much emotion, which we would have never seen from the barricaded version of Ilya throughout the many years of this season, which gives Shane the perfect opportunity to do what he does best, which is come in amatory, risky character, and we are finally seeing Ilya in his rawest, most uninhibited self, and for this professing of love to be done in Russian, in his native tongue, and in a way that he could do it without apparent consequences, almost as like a practice run, and have someone so loving and willing and ready to absorb whatever you share with them, even if it's not in any language that they understand. That was really important, and gave us as viewers the first real concrete insight that Ilya's there. He is scared, rightfully so, but loves Shane and has loved Shane, and he doesn't see the other side of the phone, but Shane is just sitting there trying to be as thoughtful and absorbent as humanly possible, and he has no idea that his dreams have come true, and that the guy he's had a crush on for 10 years or whatever has finally admitted that he loves you. Oh, I don't care how many times you watch that show. That scene always hits. Okay, I'm done. Feel better? Yes. Thank you. Again, Shane, the cutest. Maybe one day you can teach me Russian and to, retract a little bit because we exposed a lot, even though in Russian, we get Ilya being like, oh, only the important words. And even in that, Shane knows he's joking, which again is an evolution of where they're at. And instead, he hesitates and offers up an alternative. How about I wish you were here right now? And as far as Shane knows, Ilya responds to teach him how to say that, but he's not saying that. He's saying, I wish I was there too. In the past, I've had very hard conversations with people, not necessarily in the vein. And that ultimate release of saying the thing is such a testament to the trust you have with that person, but is equally euphoric in that you've said it. It's not a thought trapped in your head anymore. I know this is a stepping stone because he hasn't said it in English yet. But even being able to say it out loud in Russian must have been such a massive relief. And the fact that Connor had like a couple weeks of, a Russian dialect coach to get there is absurd. Obviously, I'm not a native Russian speaker, so I can't critique, the nuances. But I am constantly amazed by that scene and by the vulnerability that both Shane and Ilya demonstrate in that moment. And as always, you wish the language barrier didn't exist and that they could have gotten there through that moment, and maybe they wouldn't have, right? This is a safe way for Ilya to share. But I am so happy that Ilya, I guess, is recognizing Shane as a safe place, as a constant potential source of support. And even if it's not overtly saying it, he is able to admit to himself and say out loud in Russian that he loves Shane. Such a massive, massive moment, and one that always fucking makes me cry, which I am not a fan of. All right. We're moving on to my least favorite part of the episode. Chapter titled Injured. And we get another small moment on the ice. Shane skates over. Are we still on for tonight? And subtly suggesting that he has grown to trust Ilya more or whatever. He gives him the front door code to his condo instead of, meeting him out in the back alley. And Ilya toying with him is like, oh, front door, brave. But it is symbolic. It is, in some metaphorical way, don't want you to be this like dirty secret that I'm sneaking in through, the back door in the alley. I want you to have full access to me, privileged access to me, admitting that my wall and my concerns and whatever may be overshadowed by how much I like you, how much I want you, and also how I want at some point you to exist in my life. They are clearly not at a point that they've committed themselves to one another, to being out or anything. But this is the first step of Shane kind of pulling his wall down and being like, walk through the lobby. Code's 1919. Oh, God. This slow-mo, the looks that they are giving one another, oh, God. They are clearly so happy. And as a viewer, all you want is for the momentum to keep building in a positive direction. And here we go. So our buddy got his bell rung, and as inserting myself in Ilya's skates, knowing what I know as an MD, you you could not, in Russian, admit to Shane that he loves him and he's it, and it's more than anything he wants or ever could have wanted. Happening just as Shane is lovingly glancing back at Ilya, which I'm sure for him tapped into some of the insecurities and other things that his childhood and other experiences have drilled into him, but that seemingly, although no fault of his own, potentially Ilya is an unsafe place for Shane. And we see Shane being taken off the ice. They, the team is telling him, we're calling your parents, don't worry. And in this hyper concussed state, he is like, tell him I'm fine. He's going to worry. And they're like, yeah, we're already contacting your dad. And like, no, Ilya. And admittedly, I've only ever been on the other side of this to Shane. I actually did a lot of research around traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury before I moved into job. But there is something so visceral about, obviously, call my mom, call my dad, right? But being in the closet and having someone else who loves you deeply, who cares about you deeply, who should be someone that's informed at the very least of what's going on, but you have never vocalized that. That's somewhat terrifying. And as we'll see in a second, I know this is a fairly universal experience, but so many people in the closet are terrified to go under anesthesia in the fear of, in the post-wake up fog, admit these sorts of things. And it's sad, but it's true. Like, this scene rolling into the hospital was like a little triggering of like the sub-closeted version of me that doesn't exist anymore. Is like, you need to shut up. You need to keep your mouth shut. You need to put your brain elsewhere. But it's real. Like, I explicitly remember going to get my wisdom teeth pulled, and my single biggest fear was outing myself. All right, enough of me. Back to the show. The second Ilya walks in, we get this big Ilya, and I actually think this scene is incredibly important for Shane in that he is always hyper regimented and careful with the things he's saying and the way he's acting and what he's showing or not showing, X, Y, and Z. In this moment, he lacks the ability to do so. And thus, Ilya gets to see, while a little doped up, what is underneath the surface of Shane. He's carefree and expressing clear emotions of joy, just like having seen this man. And while obviously you take that with a grain of salt because he's feeling good, it's almost like more truthful in that moment. And this is a total aside. But my husband had a procedure on his sinuses late last year. And I took him in, obviously. And post-op, it is like this giddy, uninhibited version of that person that you get to see for a second, that they're just like so happy to see you, and they keep asking you questions about what happened or how they're doing or whatever. And even if they repeat it 85 times, it's like this almost like unblinded joy, I guess. Every time they open their eyes, they see you and they're like happy that you're there and they have things to ask. And that reminded me a ton of this moment, and that despite all of the barriers Shane has felt that he needs to put up for the world and or Ilya gets a rare view of Shane uninhibited. And the door closes, and Ilya is struggling. He begins with some, generic, I just wanted to, and has to pivot to, are you okay? And he is terrified, and not obviously intentionally, because Shane's on the good juice. He launches into his own lighthearted, fractured collarbone, blah, blah, and seemingly indicating that Ilya already knew what his response was going to be. Could have been worse. And Shane echoes that. And seemingly, trying to apologize on behalf of Marlo. He's like, he didn't mean to. And Shane is not mad. He's like, yeah, this happens every once in a while. You'll get your bell rung, and just as he's finishing that, maybe the pump sent another little bit of medicine into the line. But he can't help himself but want Ilya to come from this, standing on the wall stance, to be close to him. I guess. Hey. And Ilya is terrified, but wants to go and give him comfort. He goes over and holds his hand, but he's kind of shh. And while the lines here read somewhat infantile, the second that Ilya grabs his hand, he's like, yes, better. And his eyes close. That is, for me, one of the most visceral moments of the season. That hopped up on all the pain meds that he should be on because of the injuries he sustained. Feeling scared in this hospital room, not knowing what's going to happen, accepting his fate. All he wanted was this. All he needed was this. Was the man he loves there holding his hand. And at that point, he could relax. And we get a fairly raw response from Ilya, admitting that you scared me. And of course, Shane, apologizes for not texting him. That's clearly not what Ilya meant. And we get the thumb across the cheek. And still, even through the stupor, the medically induced stupor, Shane had a plan. He had a plan for last night, and he feels no reason to hold that back and the ask back now. And despite Ilya trying to halt him from sharing, he jumps into a line that lives absolutely rent-free in my brain in the same melody in which he says it. And I think this is a universal feeling. Come to my cottage this summer. Russia. Come to my house. Private, no one will know. We go two alone. Together. Maybe. Maybe is enough for Shane at this point. He's smiling and nodding along. And the nurse walks in. And Shane go, oh no. Mentally collect ourselves. Tell him that I'm gay and that you're sick of being my beard. And we get back to Shane feeling very uncomfortable with lying to them. And lying more so than he has already, which is important and I think plays a huge role in the first bit of episode 6 that we see. And Mama Witch needs him to know that the first period is starting, so here we are. Again, Witch Una. It's like, oh, he's playing hurt again. It's probably his ribs. Okay. I also love this dynamic switch where we've had Shane very close with his mom throughout this whole thing. She's playing momager X, Y, and Z. And his dad has taken a bit of a backseat from a character development perspective. Una and Shane are watching TV. Which, again, almost distinctly opposing to Ilya's experience, even more so than I think we've seen thus far. The role-based differences, I guess, between traditional male-female structure and what Shane grew up with and is used to. And we get our first little sneak peek that Yuna has heard Ilya went to visit Shane at the hospital. As a future parent, and as someone who has lived many years as a kid, anything that brings your kid joy or comfort in times of immense pain and confusion, regardless of what you think about them, your heart must melt. And this acknowledgement of like, she doesn't even understand why, but Ilya going to visit Shane is a perfect kind of precursor for what they will have the joy of facing in episode 6. It is also funny in this moment, she's projecting that Scott Hunter, this is his year. She seems to have always been on the nose with a lot of things hockey related, and yet is so nose blind to what her son is going through emotionally or relationally, X, Y, and Z. And Shane asks, and in improper grammar, which is unlike him, how are your ribs? They're killing me. How's your head? And we get a better, and Ilya just responds with good. And Yuna comes out and is like, turn off the lights, stay off the screens, the things that he's been told to do. And I don't know why this resonated with me, but it was like Shane being like, I'm a fully grown adult, thanks. Was a bit of him, I don't know, inching his own space very softly, in preparation for what he doesn't know is to come in episode 6, but just for the first time beginning to create space. And fuck. And we are going to move on to the next segment, which is Sunshine. And I am not, been filming for 6 hours and 23 minutes. Let's end this off with I know there are so many different audiences that love and consume this show. As a cis male who is gay, I don't know that there's any piece of media that has mattered more to me than this episode. Running the gamut of Shane coming out to Rose, which was beautifully tender and well done, to Ilya and Shane finding this common place that they have yet to be able to find in Tampa, and Shane being firm in what he feels and what he hopes and wants from Ilya, to that placing us in a spot where he could call Ilya after his dad died and try to make it better. And Svetlana lovingly pushing Ilya at the funeral dinner, which I genuinely think catalyzed that call, the monologue, in which Ilya was able to say all the things he wanted to the man he loves, who had no clue, but was simply happy to have played a part, even though silent and unintelligible, in his navigation of his dad's death. To the scary, very scary reality for Ilya that while he cares about two people, one of which he very much cares about, Shane, everything is at risk. And there are opportunities at all turns of the corner where that person could be taken away from you. And he realizes the risk of continuing to love Shane. And that in loving anyone introduces risk, because that person can come and go, to the ultimate moment where we get Skip finally having their happy ending in the most public way, which clearly catalyzes an incredibly important decision between Ilya and Shane when Ilya's like, I'm coming to the cottage. This episode is world class cinematography and acting. And it has kicked my whole ass. I'm so happy for them. And they're finally trying to get their sunshine. Fuck. What an episode. I've been filming for 6 hours and 40 minutes. So I need to shut the fuck up and cut it so that this can become something. An absolute emotional roller coaster. And one that is hit on like real life shit. So, love them. Episode 5 was unfreaking believable. And if you are sadistic and have somehow lasted this long, throw a loon call my way. You guys are absolute heroes. And next up, you will see me and my husband debate some like core pieces of what I thought happened this episode. And after that, we will be on to the cottage. All right. Bye.